Well, hello.
Hi there, Juliet.
Hi, Mick. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Let me greet our kind audience. I just wanted to thank everyone so much for joining us today for this conversation, which I personally have been looking forward to for about 6 months.
Mhm.
I am Juliet Grames. I am the editorial director at Soho Press, where I have the very great privilege of being the editor of this incredible, one and only inimitable man beside me, Mick Herron. He is the number one Sunday Times best-selling author of many novels, including the Slough House series, which I'm sure we are going to talk a little bit about today. He's the winner of the Gold, Steel, and most recently, Diamond Daggers from the Crime Writers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and he has been translated into over 25 languages. Mick, do you speak all 25 of those languages personally?
See.
Yeah, I knew it. And his ninth Slough House novel, Clowntown, came out yesterday, and that's what we're here to celebrate. I do want to say that Barnes and Noble has a signed edition of Clowntown that is available. It's really special to have a book that Mick himself has signed all the way over in England. Much shipping was involved in making this book come to you, so it was quite a feat of engineering. And if you are interested in that signed edition, there's a link in the chat so you can order it. So Mick, thank you so much for making time for us today. How do you feel?
I'm feeling great, thank you. Yes, publication in the UK here is tomorrow, so I'm about to set off on a tour of the UK. But this is a lovely way of kicking off the American edition.
So you're in a very strange limbo zone where half of you exists in this hemisphere, but in the other hemisphere, you don't exist yet. That's incredible.
That's right. Yes, I'm a completely unknown anonymity over here at the moment.
Anonymity.
That will all change
Wow.
tomorrow.
Well, I can't wait. I'm glad how this worked out. You get to have two separate pub dates, and we can really focus on the US for this little brief minute before you're an absolute worldwide phenomenon with this book. Um, I just want to say how relieved I am that this book has been published, Mick. I'm so relieved that it's out in the world and that people can go out and buy it and read it, and I don't have to bear the burden alone anymore because friendly readers in the audience, I want to tell you what happened when I received this manuscript um, under strictest embargo. And I had to read this absolutely harrowing, gut-wrenching suspense thriller, the likes of which I had never read before. It was by far the most harrowing suspense plot I have encountered in 15 years as a crime fiction editor. And then I couldn't talk to anybody at all about it, Mick.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Just the way it goes. You will from now, obviously, from now on, you can do so.
Yeah. I'm
That is
glad. I'm
all
really glad. But my first question for you, Mick, was why did you do that to me? Why did you write such a harrowing, edge of your seat suspense novel?
Oh, I thought you were asking why I put the embargo on it. That was nothing to do with me. That was my agent. Why did I write such a harrowing novel? Well, I didn't intend to. I mean, I never know quite how a book is going to turn out when I start writing it. And this one, yes, there's a scene towards the end which does generate quite a lot of angst, I hope, in the reader. There's quite a lot of tension there. But that was a really difficult scene for me to write. It was a chapter's worth, and I must have written that chapter 5 or 6 times. I would get a little way into it, and I had to stop and start again. There's a lot of choreography involved in it. It involves quite a lot of characters all converging on the same place and in and out of the same building, all coming in by different routes and all meeting each other in different ways. And it was a difficult one to write because I don't plan in advance perhaps as much as I ought to. If I had, it might be a bit easier. With that particular chapter, if I'd actually sat down and drawn a diagram, it would probably have been a lot easier. But I prefer the more organic approach.
Do you
So a lot
also
of the
draw?
characters, hmm?
Do you also draw? Do you?
No,
Oh,
no,
well
but
then
it would be little stick people wandering around,
I don't know. I don't know if it would
avoid
have been
child's drawing of a house.
helpful at all.
So a lot of the what happens in terms of the plot, a lot of the tension and suspense, it comes about on the page. It's not planned in advance particularly. It's just Intuition, really. If you're writing something that is clearly supposed to generate some kind of suspense, then there are various methods that a writer can draw upon to generate that. But it's not planned, as I say. It's all comes out in the page or on the
I'm I'm
screen.
I'm actually so interested to hear you say this. The idea of you having to write a scene 5 or 6 times. I mean, I just assume that the book is wholly hatched from the brilliance of your mind at every level, and that you never have struggles like that. So you're a human after all.
You would think it gets easier after a while. I mean, this is, I was counting up the other day, I think it's my 17th full-length novel, which makes me feel old. I don't know how it makes you feel, Juliet. And by now, you would think that a certain amount of it would be, not automatic perhaps, but routine, if nothing else. But every beginning is a new beginning, and every mountain there is a new one to climb. And the challenge I always set myself with starting to write a book is to write the best one I've written, and that's never changed. Even way back when I was writing unpublished crap, it was still going to be better than the previous one. That was always the plan. So yeah, it should come swiftly. I mean, observers might think it should be coming quite swiftly by now, and that it's that I can do this and I know how to do it and I'm experienced at doing it, and therefore it ought to be coming quite easily to me. But it never does, and I think it would be worrying if it did.
I think it's actually really inspiring to hear that there's still an art goal. You've been now dubbed Grand Master of everything, and that there's still an art goal in each piece of art that you work on. I think that's lovely. We should tell the people what the book is about in case they haven't read the book copy. Now, this is difficult because we can't spoil anything. So I'll say in broad strokes, in Clowntown, which is the ninth Slough House novel, we have Jackson Lamb and his troupe of ne'er-do-well, down and out spies, MI5 spies, coming together to deal with an issue that arose out of an operation from the Troubles era that is now bearing some unwanted fruit. That's sort of it in a nutshell without spoiling too much, right? I I guess Mick, can you tell us what the book is about for you? Like, what was the core kernel? Where did the idea come from?
Often when I start writing a Slough House novel, the core idea is really, what do these guys do next? What can I find for them to do? Like many series, I mean, there's a certain element of soap opera involved in that. I mean, ideally, a reader will get to know the characters and want to know what happens to them next. And I want to explore what happens to them next, and also to try and find what the next steps would be from wherever it was that I left them last time. Because I don't press a reset button when I start to write a novel. My characters tend to be quite traumatized or damaged by the
They
previous
do.
installment.
They do. Yeah, they do.
And
You're not very nice to them.
I'm not, and starting to write a new novel is often my way of apologizing to them and saying it's okay, guys, this time around it's going to be better. There's going to be a happy ending. You're all going to be fine. But of course, that never actually
Never.
happened. Never. So I mean, that's part of it. It's simply wanting to carry on my own relationship with these imaginary people. But also there'll be, something that interests me, some kind of theme that I want to pursue. And with this one, I was interested in the idea of older spies. And this isn't the Slow Horses. This is a bunch that in the book I call the Brains Trust. These people who were spies during the time of the Troubles, pre-Good Friday Agreement, so going back into the 80s and early 90s, and who are involved in a very morally dubious operation, which is in fact based on a real life operation that happened. What I was interested in was writing about people who had intended to do good. They joined the intelligence service, the security service, in order to protect their communities and to prevent harm from happening. And it turned out that in this particular instance, the operation they were involved in involved protecting an asset of the intelligence services, who was himself a murderer, a torturer, a monstrous individual,
Yeah.
essentially. And when the Troubles era came to an end, this particular character in real life was taken out of the provinces and given a new identity by the intelligence services, essentially pensioned off. And he, although he'd been responsible for many, many deaths, he lived out his life and died natural causes. And I was interested in a sense, the post-traumatic stress disorder that might affect the people who had been involved in that operation. How would they feel about it if the main aspect of their professional life, which is supposed to be one of, integrity and principle, um, was, as I say, protecting this monster? How would they feel about it? Would they feel that they had been sidelined or somehow duped by their own employers, by the service that they worked for? And if so, would they try to seek some kind of reparation much later in life, when in their own lives things had not gone terribly well, perhaps? So that was part of it. It was that idea of seeking some kind of justice for their own involvement in what was a very nasty operation.
Does this happen often that there is a true MI5 case that in any way inspires or is woven into the plot? It's not every book,
No,
is it? No.
no. There's only two occasions where I've quite consciously taken something that actually happened. There's this
Mm,
one, and Slough House. The trigger for that plot was the attempted murders of particular individuals in Salisbury by members of the Russian Secret Service. They failed to kill the person they were attempting to kill, but they did kill somebody else,
mm.
and that I used as the springboard for Slough House. But in both those cases, I'm not writing about that particular operation. I'm not very interested in the tradecraft that was there on whichever side it happened to be. I'm not very interested in how these operate. I mean, interested, but not in a creative way. I don't want to write
Yeah.
about these things. What I want to write about is the kind of human fallout from such things, if you like, and also to allow my own imagination to take a real life event and say, but what if, but what if, but what if, and go off in that direction.
So I was thinking about it. So Slow Horses came out in 2010, and that this means this is the 15th anniversary of this series. And I'm curious, if you're looking back in 2010, did you imagine that these characters would end up where they have in Clowntown? How much of this did you see coming? Is this what you would have picked for yourself in 2010, or has the series surprised you, taken any directions you weren't expecting?
Well, I never planned it as a series, so it's still a
Well,
surprise in many ways that I'm still writing these books. Um, I would never have imagined it would go on in the direction that it has done. By which I mean, what it's done for my career in terms of and the career of the slow horses themselves. They're pretty much in stasis. The ones who have survived are still where I put them back in 2010. And it's important to point out that the fact that we have come through 15 years since then doesn't mean they have. They're still in the present day, but they haven't aged in the rest of us have. So they're really quite lucky. I don't know what they're complaining about.
it's just a modest death count that they've faced. That's just um so we are avoiding spoilers today at all costs. I do have a number of excellent audience questions that I want to get to. There's no way I'll get to them all, but before we get there, I do think that we absolutely need to talk about the TV series because I know that it brought a lot of readers in. We have people who are encountering you for the first time through the Apple TV Plus series, and then they're coming to your books as well as going in the opposite direction. And there's this lovely, if anyone in the audience today has seen the series, I personally find it really fun to watch a season and compare it against the book and see how closely it adhered, etc. Um, but Mick, I did want to ask you, can you tell the viewers today how closely involved are you in the series production? They're very curious about things like are you involved in casting? Are you involved in screenwriting at all there? And then my follow-up question to you is over the last 5 years or so that the series has been such a big part of your life, has it changed your approach to crafting a new novel in the series?
Right. I get asked about the casting a lot. I mean, the casting is so extraordinary. But I have to say, I've had nothing whatsoever to do with that. That sort of issue takes place well above my pay grade. This is nothing to do with me. Um, that's largely true in any adaptation. For the author of the originating material to be involved closely involved. Have a controlling involvement in a screen version is pretty unusual. I mean, you really have to be on J.K. Rowling level for that to actually work. So no, I have been involved in the production. I've been in the writer's room. I haven't written any of the scripts. I have been involved in the adaptation, which is really, it's problem solving. When you take a book and try to turn it into something that can appear on the screen, you've got a lot of hurdles to jump over, because certainly with the way I write, and which is, very, very common way of doing it, there's a lot of interiority involved. So I'm writing from the inside of a character's head. I can tell you what they're thinking and what they're feeling, which is not something you can do on screen. You have to find a different way of presenting that state. So there are all sorts of difficulties like that, and there are other very practical ones, in terms of budget constraints, often, and well, any number of practical things come up, from actor availability to what the weather is like at the time of filming, that sort of thing. So there are all those sorts of problems, and I'm in the writers' room when we're going through them, and hopefully helping find solutions to them. And I read the scripts. I don't always see the final versions of the scripts, in fact, but I'm generally up to speed with how they're being produced. And I've had cameos in a couple of the shows. I've had 3 now. Not all of them have been seen yet. And I've been on set. I've got to know some of the actors quite well. I've discussed often with one or two of them how they play their characters, and actors often want to know more about the characters than is available on the script and even in the books, and they assume, and this is very interesting for me that they assume that I know more about the characters than I actually do. It's as if I have a kind of wealth of information about them which I've never bothered to write down. That's not true. The characters only exist on the page. Their entire existence, as far as I'm concerned, is there on that page. I'm not holding back anything about any of them, except stuff that I do plan to put in the next book.
That is fascinating.
So when I'm asked, what school did they go to, if I haven't said in the book what school they went to, then I don't know. But that gives the actors a certain amount of license as well. I think it's perfectly legitimate for them to decide on certain aspects of the character's history if it's not been provided for them by either the author or the scriptwriter. So there's a lot goes on, and a lot of it is I'm as kind of separate from it as any of the other viewers, because in a sense I've handed this over. Although I do have, as I say, involvement with the production team, I've handed it over to the producers, to the writers, and to the cast. And the cast are entitled to lay claim to much of their characters, because after all, they are inhabiting them. Gary's doing a wonderful job as Jackson Lamb, and I love it, and I really enjoy seeing him do it. But it's separate from my Jackson Lamb,
right?
And it has to be. It has to be, because I'm writing something that is words on a page, and he is presenting something that is a character on a screen. So you can see him for a start. You don't have to imagine what he looks like. It's there. It's there on the screen in front of you, and he's doing all that for you. So I'm perfectly happy that this should be going on the way it does, because to demand absolute fidelity and to just want every event page by page to be presented on the screen would be deadly dull, apart from impractical and probably impossible in many ways. As far as I'm concerned, the books exist and they're there, and if readers enjoy them, that's great. The screen version is something different. It's a different thing, and there will be times where it parts company with the original text, and I don't think that's anything for viewers, even those who very much enjoy the books. Nothing to get upset about. Enjoy it for being the different beast that it is.
And nothing has ever bothered you. No departure that you're secretly hiding that we can keep among this cast of very close 200 friends or whoever we are.
No, there's nothing that that I would feel necessary to share with anybody that I have misgivings about, because there are very, very few misgivings, and the ones that are more indicative of my own pernickety nature than anything else. There was a certain mistake made about how the trains operate, for instance. As a former commuter, this mattered to me very much.
Sometimes those things that we say we let them go and that we don't let them bother us, but then in fact maybe they are just kind of festering under the skin to the degree that we need to write a joke about them into our next book.
That sort of thing helps, I find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just hypothetically. Um, so I am assuming that everyone on the call today knows the Slough House series, because if they haven't, then they've probably been lost during the last 25 minutes of conversation. But I'm not sure that they know deeply how many other excellent books you have outside of the Slough House series. Mick has written a whole other series, the Zoe Bohm series, as well as a number of really fantastic standalones. So if you are craving your Mick Herron fix between Slough House installments, you should check those out. Today, I want to just spend one little minute on your debut novel, Down Cemetery Road, which came out in 2003 and which I absolutely adore. It is the first book in the Zoe Bohm series, which features an Oxford detective. And those of us who love Oxford and know that you live and write from Oxford, and we may be interested in that trivia, we may also be interested in the trivia that none other than Dame Emma Thompson herself, who is probably the most glorious human being, except Mick Herron, to ever have walked the planet. And my just author and star of my favorite movie of all time, which is Sense and Sensibility. Anyway, she also loves Down Cemetery Road and has taken on this project for herself to star in for Apple TV in a series that is coming out this fall.
That's right. It starts streaming the week after season 5 of Slow Horses finishes. And it's an
So
8-part series, so it'll go on into Christmas, I think.
so we've got your whole fall sorted. You read
No, I got your
Clowntown.
fall sorted, Juliet. That's how it
Well, that too.
is.
But for your readers, they buy Clowntown and they read it. Then they get to watch the Slow Horses installment. Then they have to read Down Cemetery Road because they don't want it spoiled for them by the series. And then they can watch Dame Emma Thompson bring it to life. Well, tell us a little bit about Down Cemetery Road.
Well, I will say, to pick up on what I was saying just earlier, that this is an example of a book that will part company quite substantially with the original text for a number of
Ooh,
reasons. One is that the book was written and it came out in 2003, as you say. I'd actually finished writing it several years before then. So to bring it up to the present day, a lot of things have to be changed. I mean, mobile telephones, for instance, are far more prevalent now than they were then. That sort of thing, which does affect a plot a lot. And the other thing is that although we're saying it's the first of the Zoe Bowen books, she only makes a very small appearance in the book,
it's
really. She's
true.
not in it very much. She's the lead, she takes the lead role in the following books in the series. But at the time, she was it's a not quite a bit part, but very much a supporting role to the main character, who's called Sarah Tucker, played by Ruth Wilson, the wonderful Ruth Wilson in the TV show. So, in order to make Emma's role more meaty, I mean, that it's been, there's a lot of changes have been made just to bring Emma into it a lot more, which is right. You've got Emma Thompson, you want to see her on the screen,
Yeah,
definitely. So it will be a bit different. But the essential plot remains the same. And it's the story of a youngish woman. I mean, she feels very much like a young woman to me now. She was a bit older than me when I started writing the book. Sarah, who's living in Oxford, unhappy marriage, although she doesn't quite realize how unhappy she is at the time. She knows she's bored, and an event happens in her neighborhood. A nearby house explodes. A child goes missing, and she decides to find out what happened to the child, mostly as a way of avoiding tackling the issues in her own life. This is very much displacement activity, but it rapidly becomes something much bigger and more dangerous than she was expecting. And that's the start of it, and it goes on from there, really.
it's really great. And I hope people check it out. And I hope it brings them to the second book in the series, which has one of my favorite moments in fiction. And then, just check out Mick Herron's backlist. It's there for you if you haven't discovered it yet, and you'll love it. So Mick, we're at the half-hour mark. So I think I'm going to go to the many audience questions and see if I can get to a big chunk of them. They're wonderful. So I had to pick and choose, and it was hard, but luckily we've answered a couple of them as we've gone already. So,
Great.
but the first one comes from Jeff, and Jeff asks, Are there any decisions you've made in the plots of earlier books that you've regretted when writing later books because of the complications they've caused? And I too would like to know the answer to that.
Where I've done something in a book that has had ramifications in later novels, that's generally been because I've been setting myself a challenge. There are a couple of times where I've ended a book, not quite on a cliffhanger, because I like books to be sort of total and complete unto themselves, but I've indicated that something else is going on that is left unresolved. And each time I've done that, I have not known what the resolution would be.
And you wouldn't describe that as a cliffhanger, Mick?
I suppose it is a cliffhanger, but it's always it's not central to the plot of the book that it occurs in. It's central to the book that follows generally, and I've never known quite how I'm going to resolve it. But it's always been the challenge. If when I start writing the next book, that's one of the things I've got to deal with, and it's good to have these challenges there to get your brain into gear. To get the creative juices flowing.
For
So
sure.
I've never regretted anything except occasionally the death of some characters. I don't kill characters off lightly, and I never do them casually. It's if a character dies, one of the main characters dies in a book, it's always been one of the trigger points that I've had before starting to write the novel. I would never get halfway through a book and think this needs a bit of oomph to it. I'm going to kill somebody off. I've always known before I start writing a book that character was going to die. Now
Oh,
I don't.
that's a relief. You only commit premeditated murder.
That's right. It's always
Right.
premeditated. And it's not like I believe they're real people or anything. I don't have conversations with my own characters or anything like that. But I do try to individuate them so that each of them has their own tone of voice, their own mood, and their own attitudes. And once I've killed a character off, I no longer have access to that voice anymore. And I do regret that sometimes because there are times when it would be useful to have one of those earlier characters around, either because they're good at kicking doors down, or because they're good at a particular kind of humor that I can no longer access.
And are you ever tempted to pull an Arthur Conan Doyle and reveal that they've been alive the whole time?
The only time I've done that, I knew at the time I would quite deliberately fudge the issue of a particular death way back in the first novel.
I think we all know which one that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I left it open as to whether this character was really dead or not,
You,
and I eventually, and then I forgot all about the character, and it was actually Will Smith who said, "What about what about this
this
back and
person.
forth?" Oh yeah, I thought yes, let's bring them back. No, I wouldn't suddenly reveal that someone everybody kind of knew was dead wasn't really dead. There's got to have been a deliberate kind of obfuscation involved.
Okay. All right.
No
That's
cheating, in other words, no
no
cheating.
cheating, no cheating, only premeditated murder. Fantastic. So Lori has a question. How do you pace yourself while writing a new novel? And what does your writing schedule typically look like?
Well, I tend to write. I mean, ideally, when I'm not called away to do other things, I'll write between 9 and 5, by which I really mean 10 to 4. That's when I'm in my writing space. And all the work I do is done during those hours, and that's as much of a pace as I set myself, really, because I'm also doing other things then. I mean, I read a lot during my working day. I regard that as part of my job.
Mm.
It's also a great perk. And I'm alone during this time. I'm not at home. There's nobody around. All the books since Slow Horses have been written in this same apartment where I go to write. And I treat myself very gently, I have to say. I mean, it's a difficult job writing. It's really, really hard work. It's very, very tiring. You need to lie down a lot. You need to, contemplate the greater mysteries of life while you're doing it, and you need to snack quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
So during the course of however many hours it is, the 6 or 7 hours that I'm at my writing space, I will spend anything up to 2 hours, working. And the rest of it is mostly brooding on whatever it is I happen to be writing, which is
And
a
snacking.
necessary part of the job. And I'm not kidding when I say that. When I was writing Slow Horses, and several of the novels that followed it, and earlier books too, of course, I was commuting, and I had a day job. I was commuting into London. I was working a full day at an office somewhere in London, and then traveling back. The journey door to door was about 2 hours both ways.
Mm.
And I didn't write on the train because I found writing a very personal thing, and I have to be in my own
Mm.
space to do it. But I was thinking about what I was going to be doing when I got home. So when I got home, I had about an hour or so of energy left because it's quite tiring working for a living, as many people know. And but during that hour, I had, had a whole day of thinking about what I was going to be doing. So I would get through quite a bit in that hour. I would write 350 words, and that was, enough. You do that every day, you get a book within, I'm not going to do the maths, you do the maths. Now, I've got all day to do it technically, but I have to have that reading time. That's still a necessary part of writing the book. I don't just sit down, turn on, and start typing. It's not about typing speed, it's about the speed of creativity, I suppose. So even though I've got many more hours in which to do my job, I'm writing at the moment, I'm writing 500 words a day in that
Mm.
space of time, between, as I say, 10 and 4 or half 9, half.
Mm.
And but I'm it takes that amount of time to produce that number of words, or it does for me. Everybody's got a different speed. And I do find that I have what I'm writing to are the limits of my own creative energy, really. Sometimes I'll know hours before I'm supposed to finish that I've got nothing more to do that day. There's no point in my continuing to work because I'm spent. Other days, I'll leave the office on a high because I know that I've done quite a lot and I know exactly what I want to do the following day. So it varies, but one's energies differ um, on a depending on your own rhythms, I suppose.
So,
Time of year, who knows?
so several people have asked this question, and I'm curious too, and follow up to what you were just describing. Do you outline? Are those 500 words put into something that you already know you have to write, or are you a pantser?
I'm a pantser, yeah. I don't outline. I do have a destination in mind, and I've got certain stops along the way. As I said, if one of my characters is going to die, I know about
Right.
that beforehand, and I know what the book is about, but
Yeah.
I don't have a detailed plot. I was working earlier today, and I've been writing a scene. This is not a Sly House novel, by the way. Two characters are having a conversation, a dialogue, and I've been writing this for some days now. It must have been last week that I started writing this scene, and I've got not quite to the end of this particular scene. But I've been writing for quite a while, and one of the characters just said something to the other character, and I thought that is actually what this scene is all about.
Mm.
So now I have to go back and reconfigure the conversation so that that's kind of a destination rather than something that just kind of occurs
Happens.
to us. I now understand what these characters are doing with each other in this scene, and that happens quite a lot. It won't require a huge amount of rewriting, but it will require a slight shift in attitude. And much of writing is like that. I mean,
That's
overall, it's often only when you've actually finished the novel that it's clear what some part of you was aiming at, subconsciously. I think now, looking at it, Clowntown is quite a transitional novel, but I didn't set out to write a transitional novel, but that's
mm,
what has happened. And I can see it now in various different aspects of the plot and the character relationships that have got either developed or terminated in the book. But it wasn't, it's not conscious, but there's some part of an awareness of what kind of coherent whole I'm trying to create that does produce that kind of underlying theme that runs throughout, the different plot threads or the different characters in the book.
that's very organic. That's so hard for me to wrap my head around. Do you have, when you embark on it, besides, the beats you have to hit, as you mentioned, will you have notions of scenes in your mind or conversations that are going to happen at the three-quarters point or later that you want to get to?
Often, not always, but often, yeah.
And then do you ever get there and find that you don't want them or they've lost their impact or
The ones that, yeah, I mean, like so many things in life, the ones that you're really looking forward to aren't always all that by the time you get to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really fascinating. I guess it's true that every artist has a different process. Um the especially for me, I mean, I can't wait for the people on this call to read the book so that we can talk about this in specifics and I don't have to
Mhm.
dance around it, but like imagining how you constructed this particular book without an outline is just mind-boggling to me. I'll leave it at that. Let's move on. Um, uh, sometimes you shouldn't tap too strictly at the veneer of genius, because if you see within, it will break your brain, Mick. So I'm not going to ask you any more questions about that. Just let's not touch it. Robin would like to know, why did you choose to write in this genre, Mick Herron?
Um, I often recall something that Stephen King said when asked that same question. He replied, "What makes you think I have a choice?" It's not. It's not quite that way with me, but almost is. It was development, really. I mean, I started off in the crime genre. The reason really is structure. I like to have that kind of structure there, which means that you are definitely working your way towards a conclusion, rather than writing, a slice of life which could stop at any moment or just continue indefinitely. And I didn't want to write that kind of book. I mean, I did once attempt to write that kind of book, and I never finished it. It might still be writing itself somewhere in a drawer. It was, because there was no particular story, because it was just, more of a kind of saga than a story. It just kind of ran and ran. There was no conclusion. So the crime genre does impose the need to reach an end. So that was important to me. And I started off with Down Cemetery Road in the thriller genre, but bending towards individuals. There were two characters in that, really. Well, one and a half. There was Sarah, and Zoe comes into it. And the following books were mostly Zoe, but Sarah was still around. And I was tending to write from an individual viewpoint. I wanted to write ensemble pieces. I wanted more characters in there. I wanted to write more about politics as well. And when you're writing about spies, you can write about systems of government, systems of power in a way that you can't when you're writing about a private eye. Or you can, but it would require
A
heavy
little
duty.
ham
Yeah,
fisting, yeah.
you would, you would. So it just felt like quite a natural progression, really, in many ways. And I was pushed that way by bigger events, the London bombings, for instance, which
Mm.
indicated that you didn't necessarily have to have a great knowledge and understanding of how global events occur. You could end up being in the middle of one just by being in a city.
Mm.
So you don't have to understand something to be bearing witness to it, for instance. And thinking about that made me realize that I could construct a book where I had a bunch of spies who didn't necessarily know what was going on. People who had been sidelined. I could write about a spy novel, but set in the margins of the espionage world. So I didn't have to have a great knowledge of how things really work. I didn't have to have a grasp on technology, because my characters have been denied access to, the technology that actual security services use. So I found a way in through a back door, really, is how it happened.
Did you what were your genre encounters when you what did you read when you were a kid? What were some of your favorite books?
Well, I read pretty much everything I could lay my hands on. I always have difficulty remembering favorites, because I remember reading as a kind of, I don't know, wandering into the forest, and there are so
Mm.
many trees there. You're just aware of all of them, and you appreciate all of them without necessarily remembering tree for tree. I read a lot of Enid Blyton, who's the great source of story when I was growing up in the UK. But I also read everything else I could. I was always, and still am, a great user of our public library system. So I could get through, many books a week. A quantity that my parents could not afford to buy me, for instance, but they were there. They were freely available to me. And I quickly graduated to adult fiction, again because of the library. And I would go for, I often read short stories because they have that kind of narrative hit. If you're like getting a quick fix, you can read a short story in a, yeah, you've got the beginning, the middle, and the end all in one go. And I thought that was terrific. I've never been much of a short story writer, but I loved reading them. Still do.
I would like to argue with that. Mick actually has a really excellent short story collection called Dolphin Junction, and everyone who's watching today should check it out. So
Mhm.
I think you're a
That
fabulous short story writer.
that's really kind, but that's almost all the short stories I've ever written were contained in that
Hey,
volume.
they are tiny works of art, as you just said, so they're not any, you know,
Mhm.
less
My
difficult
editor,
than.
ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Juliet. Um, But going back, yes, I mean, I read all sorts of children's stories. The Wind in the Willows is one that I keep going back to, because
Yeah.
that's a genuine classic which one can still read as an adult. But everything really, books about, flying horses and children having adventures everywhere and all escapism, really. I mean, that's what's the magical thing about childhood. I didn't have much to escape from in my childhood, except school. Nobody likes school when they're small. Um, and it didn't really matter to me what I was reading, so long as it was taking me somewhere different, I guess.
That's amazing. When I was wandering in the forest as a child of this metaphor, I would visit the same tree over and over and over and over until my mother would say, why are you rereading that book when there's so many other books in the world that you could be checking out? And I confess I still kind of read that way as an adult.
I do too. I reread, and there's a great deal of comfort in it, but also there's a kind of searching for understanding. How did this writer produce this book? And I'm better at understanding how the mechanics of a book work now than I was then. At the time, I would have been bowled over by the magic, and now I still am.
Yeah.
But I can also see how some of the magic is working.
Well, tell us how some of your magic works. We have a question from Pros, which I'm very interested in. How do you decide if an idea you have is good enough to be turned into a novel? And I have a second question. Have you ever had an idea that you've started to turn into a novel that you have then abandoned because it didn't cut mustard?
Right. I think if an idea won't shake loose, then I know that there's something in it that I can use. If an idea occurs to me and I'm still thinking about it a month later, uh,
Hmm.
all the ideas I have for books have arrived with me thinking, "Oh God, that's a great idea for a book." But
Yeah.
not all of those ideas have turned into books. I've
Huh.
never started writing, and no, not since I published Down Cemetery Road have I abandoned a novel after I started writing it.
Oh, quick, knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
Sorry.
But there have been ideas that come that when they arrive, I think that's brilliant. That's such a good idea. And in the cold light of day, I mean, often it is. The following morning, you're thinking, no, that's not going to work. And it really is that swift. I don't brood about things for very long. I guess
Hmm.
if I've
Just
decided
all
to
day
start an idea.
long, as you told us earlier.
Oh, about what I'm writing, yeah,
I'm
when I'm
kidding.
involved, when I'm tackling the book. But as to whether something is going to be a book or not.
Yeah.
Um, I'll know quite soon whether I'm going to hang on to it or discard it.
What a useful
Having said
skill to
that,
have.
sometimes ideas occur and then I'll dismiss them and then they come back again and say, no, hang on, I can work. And that does happen. But often these aren't necessarily about, full scale novels. They might be chapters within a
Mm, interesting.
It's difficult to pin down how ideas work and where they come from and where they go. They're quite slippery little objects. So being put to task, with a question like this, I can't really offer a definitive answer.
Well,
You kind of know it, if when it happens, when an idea for a book happens, you do know, even if not immediately, it sticks around. After a month or so, you're still thinking about it. Yeah, the only way of getting rid of it is to put it into a book.
the magic spell continues to go unbroken. What can we do? Um, so Danielle asks the question that I think we were all privately asking, which is, how excited were you that Mick Jagger wrote the theme song for the TV show Slow Horses?
I was every bit as excited as any one of you would have been in the same circumstances. What was interesting to me about that was that it happened so quickly. Most things that happen in publishing and in the creative industries generally happens at a snail's pace.
Yeah.
You find out about something, you hear the first whisper of it a long time before it actually comes into land, as it
Yeah.
were. I had known, for instance, that Gary Oldman was being talked to, and I had known that he was kind of smiling and nodding during the conversation, which went on for quite a long time before I had the phone call saying Gary's doing it. By that point, we were just waiting to hear
Yeah.
whether Gary was doing it or not. That sort of thing.
Suspense.
Whereas with Mick Jagger, I got a phone call saying, "Oh, Mick Jagger's done the theme tune," and it was like that. He had never crossed my mind. I hadn't thought about the theme tune. I hadn't thought about the soundtrack. That was somebody else's job. I don't do the music. Um, and literally, the first I heard about it was being told Mick Jagger's doing it. So that was, completely out of the blue. I had to sit there. Yeah, it was one of the very, very few instances, and this applies to the book world as much as the TV world, where something happened that I was not that it not remotely occurred to me that this might be, in the realm of possibility.
Uh, Okay, Mick, I think we have time for only one more question. But before I ask you, I want to offer this as an opportunity in case our friends at BNN want to drop the link in the chat again for where people can purchase the signed edition of Clowntown. And a reminder that we do have those. Mick actually signed the, thank you, friends. Yeah. So if you do want a signed edition of Clowntown, it will arrive with 8 to 10 days, and you can get it right here at that link. So to close us out, Mick, from Cheryl, the question is, what have you been reading recently? And have you encountered any authors recently who have inspired you?
What I've been reading recently is something outside my usual arena, in fact, because I have been reading this extraordinary book by Roger Lewis about Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Have you come across this? It's called
No.
Erotic Vagrants, and it's a story of their relationship. It's not really a biography. This is a biography written by a man who no longer has any faith in biography. He doesn't think it works anymore.
Uh-huh.
He spent more than 10 years writing this book, and it's not his first biography. And it's a story of an obsession, but it's the obsession that these two characters had for each other, Burton and Taylor, and the obsession that Lewis has with them. And he writes about their relationship, but he sort of examines their relationship through the roles that they took on screen, which is quite obvious when you're writing about something like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is
Right.
about a marriage and they both appear in it playing a married couple. Less obvious when you're writing about something like Where Eagles Dare, where only one of them appeared in anyway. So it's a very, very odd book, and it's absolutely riveting. And I'm not particularly interested in either of these people, or in the films that they made, either together or apart. But I did know that Lewis was a very interesting book reviewer. He writes
Uh-huh.
for the Sunday Times a lot, or the Times. And I'd read a lot of his reviews and thought, and I'd read the reviews of this particular book, and so I gave it a go and was completely nailed to it for the best part of a week. It's very, very long, but it's absolutely fascinating. As I say, well outside my usual reading area because I don't read very much non-fiction.
Tell us
Um,
the title.
Erotic Vagrancy. Erotic
Er-
Vag.
Erotic Vagrancy.
Hang on,
Amazing.
I may have the title wrong.
We're gonna get a
Erotic
book.
Vagrants. I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Does that happen when you encounter something that is really different from the work you're doing? Does it inspire you? Does it like provide some sort of intellectual grit?
What I mean, possibly it's very difficult to nail down, isn't it? What I did, one of the things I do take away from this book is the way he would put himself into it quite often, well, occasionally throughout the course of writing about something entirely different. There's a moment where he's talking about it being 20 years in their lives, in Taylor and Burton's lives, since something happened. And then he says, apropos of that, and I've been writing this book for more than 10 years now. And I like that bit where he would come in from left field and just impose himself suddenly and then wander off again. Every so often he would express himself about what a miserable time he was having writing this book. And I
That's
thought that was really
amazing.
quite funny and engaging. So I look at the way he chose to tell a particular story, which is a very non-traditional way of presenting a biography, and just think, well, that's interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
there must be ways of writing a thriller which are not the traditional ways of doing so, and yet can be sort of entertaining and engaging at the same time, not
yeah.
necessarily just being different for the sake of it. So that kind of inspiration, yeah, I can find that.
I can't wait to see what that composts into.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we are at time now. Thank you all for attending today. It was so nice to see all your, I didn't get to see your faces, but I imagine that they're there. And Mick, it's just as always, such a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm just so proud to have been able to work on this book, even if you did torture me for 6 months while I couldn't talk about it with anyone else.
Thanks so much, Juliet. It's been lovely talking to you as ever, and well, we will see each other soon, I hope. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this. And I hope that I managed to answer some questions and didn't just sort of waffle on indeterminately when being presented with a question.